Hello and welcome to StudyIQ. In the previous lecture, we were discussing about the LPG and its appraisal. So, we have already seen what is LPG and what was the background of adopting LPG into our country, and we were analyzing liberalization, privatization and globalization separately. And out of that, in the previous lecture, we have seen what is liberalization and how it has impacted various sectors in the Indian economy. Now, let us move on to privatization. What does privatization mean? Privatization means that shedding of ownership or management of government-owned companies. So, it is the process of privatizing. Means the ownership or management rights are given to the private sector. Ownership or management given to the private sector. So earlier it was government-owned enterprise. Now it is being transferred to the private sector. So, for this, the government has to disinvest. So, this process is called disinvestment. So, what is disinvestment? Disinvestment means privatization of public sector enterprises. Privatization of public sector enterprises, PSEs. And how is this privatization done? This privatization is done by selling a part of the equity, selling equity of this public sector enterprises to the public. To the public means to the private individuals. So, disinvestment means privatization of PSEs by selling of the shares or the equities of the PSEs to the general public. Now, let us see what is the aim or motive behind privatization. So, the first aim of privatization is to bring in private capital. So, privatization will help in improving the capital capacity of the company, which means the company will have more capital. Increase in capital will lead to increase in investment. So, investment will increase. So, this will lead to modernization of the companies. Modernization, which means modern technologies, innovations can be adopted in the companies. Also, another advantage is that we have already seen there was inefficiency associated with government enterprises. So, this will also lead to, the privatization will also lead to improvement in managerial skills. So, the government influence will come down, which means private entities will have more freedom. So, when they have more shares, they will have more voice. So, managerial skills also will improve and efficiency of the companies will also increase. Also, another advantage of privatization is that this can attract foreign direct investment. So, FDI will also flow into these sectors. So, what is FDI? FDI is in the form of investment in the, so FDI is in the form of capital, technology, manpower, infrastructure, etc. So, this will have long-term impact in the economy. So, privatization will attract FDI, which will have long-term economic benefits. Another thing to be noted here is that under privatization, the existing PSUs or the PSUs were granted some status, and it was mainly three status. One is Maharatna, Navaratna and Mini Ratna. So, we will discuss about what is Maharatna, Navaratna and Mini Ratna when we learn industries. So, in short, privatization or the aim of privatization was to privatize or sell off the shares of government owned companies through disinvestment. So, next we will see what is globalization. By definition, globalization is the integration of our economy with the world economy. That means we are integrating the economies of different countries. So, India can easily interact with other world economies. They can also come to India and we can have a interaction. The idea behind globalization is to create a borderless world. So, world without boundaries, which means that any economy is free to interact with other economies, or economic activities will take place in an open economy without any borders. When we learn globalization, outsourcing is one important term you should know. So, let us see what is outsourcing. Outsourcing means hiring regular services from other sectors or external sources. So, basically it is hiring services from external sources. In the context of globalization, outsourcing means that hiring basic services or regular services from other countries. So, what is an example of an outsourcing? Example, a US company. This company will have call centers in India. So in India, what the employees do is they will outsource or they will provide services to customers in other country. That is, in this example, it is the US. So in the call centers, what the people or employees do is they talk to customers from US. So this is what is known as outsourcing. This is an example of outsourcing. So when a company decides to outsource its services, what the company looks for? Two things mainly: low wage rate and skilled manpower. So wages should be low and manpower should have skill. So for these reasons, India has become a favorite destination for outsourcing, because low wages employees are available and also skilled employees because of our demographic dividend. So for this reason, India has become a favorite destination of outsourcing. And this can be the other way also, like Indian companies can hire services from other countries as well. Now we have seen what is globalization, what is privatization, and what is liberalization. We have also discussed what is the impact of all this in the Indian economy. So we have seen many positive changes started coming to our economy and economy prospered. But on the other side, there will be some negative impacts as well. So let us analyze or assess what are the impact of globalization, privatization and liberalization from the other side. Let us first see agriculture or agriculture sector. The first impact was that the GDP contribution of agriculture declined. If you look at the statistics, the GDP contribution has declined. And what is the reason for that? What is GDP? We have already seen that GDP is the monetary value of all the final goods and services produced in an economy. So, in an economy, you should always remember within the domestic territory. So, what happened? With globalization, liberalization and privatization, the imports increased. So, imports increased means these imports are produced outside the domestic territory of the country. So, this will not be calculated in our GDP. So, what happened? The GDP contribution of the agriculture declined. Secondly, the public investment in agriculture also declined. The public investment means the government investment. So here this is public means the government investment. Why did the government investment come down? We have seen that privatization means government is selling off, and we also learned that government is now only a facilitator, not the regulator. So the role of the government has decreased. So the government started reducing the rates of investment also. So when the government expenditures came down on agriculture, what happened was the cost of production in agriculture increased. So, for example, fertilizer subsidy. Earlier, the government used to provide subsidies for fertilizers. Now, after that, the government decreased the amount of subsidy. So the farmers have to incur that expense from their pocket. So, what happens? It will increase the cost of production of the commodity. So, when cost of production increases, what will happen? It will increase the prices of the commodities, and there is already competition from other countries. So in the market, goods are available. What will happen is that poor farmers will suffer. So cost of production of the farmers increased. Another impact was increased international competition. We have already seen with a decrease in the government expenditure, the cost of production of the farmers has gone up. So when the cost of production goes up, farmers have no way out except to increase the prices of the commodities. But now the farmers cannot even increase the prices, because if these farmers increase the prices, what will happen? Consumers will not buy their product. So already there is an international competition in the market, which means that there is adequate supply in the market. So the international products are enough for the consumers to satisfy their demands. So with increased price in the local market or increased price of local commodities will demotivate the consumers from purchasing these products. So this has made a huge impact on the farmers. They had to suffer very badly. Again, we will see that the policies of the government were export oriented. So the policies were export oriented. Why? Because now it is an open economy. So there is no trade boundaries or less trade boundaries. So the country always tries to export its commodities in order to increase its forex reserves and also to increase the international competitiveness. So the policies of the government were supporting the exports. So what happened? It had two effects. One is that this led to production of cash crops in the economy. So cash crop means those commodities which are of high value of exports. For example, pepper or cashew nut or coffee, tea, etc. Such crops were more cultivated, and this led to a decrease in the cultivation of food crops. So food crops cultivation came down, and this led to shortage of food. Again, this decreased level of food crops production led to increase in the prices of food crops, and this led to food inflation in the economy. So food inflation was also there. These were the main negative impacts in agriculture. Next, coming to the industrial sector. Industry. We will see that in the industrial sector there was a recorded slowdown. And why was this slowdown? This was because of decrease in demand of industrial goods. Why there was a decrease in the demand of industrial goods? Because cheap imports were available. Cheap imports were available in the market. So what will the consumer do? As a consumer, I and you will purchase cheap imports or cheap commodities. So Indian industries had less growth, or their commodities did not have demand in the market, and this led to decline in the growth of Indian industries. If we take the example of manufacturing sector, with the liberalization, privatization and globalization, for example, Chinese commodities entered Indian market. So we all know that Chinese products have less cost because of the higher subsidies given by the Chinese government. So when Chinese goods come to our market, what will happen? Our commodities will have lesser demand. Suppose you are going to a market, you need something. Let us assume you need an electronic product. So you will find both Indian as well as Chinese. The quality will be somehow almost the same, and Chinese product will be half the price of the Indian product. Which one will you buy? Of course the Chinese one. So with this you understand how this affected the Indian industries, and that is why we have all this anti-dumping policies, and also we have initiated the Make in India initiative and all that. We will discuss all this later in some other modules. So coming back to our topic, this was one major drawback, slowdown in the Indian industries. Secondly, our domestic manufacturers or the domestic producers, they had to all on a sudden face international competition. You must understand that they were not capable of competing with the international competitors. So they were not competent enough, and this affected the domestic manufacturers or domestic producers in the economy. Thirdly, you must understand that even though the economy was liberalized, privatized and globalized, we had lesser access to developed countries' markets. So developed countries' markets, they had imposed higher tariff rates. So our exports were not reachable, or we had lesser access to developed countries' market. For example, US market. USA has quota restrictions on textile import from India and China. So this is an example. So we had lesser access or limited access to markets of the developed countries. This was also one drawback. Now coming to the disinvestment. We have already seen what is disinvestment. It is selling of the shares and equities of government owned companies to the private or to the public, general public. So we have seen under privatization, government adopted the policy of disinvestment. Let us see what went wrong in disinvestments. So under disinvestment, government had targets every year, which means that the government targeted to sell off a particular amount of shares every year. So government had yearly targets for disinvestment, and government had to somehow meet these targets. So it was necessary for the government to meet the targets also. This led to the problem of undervaluation. So undervaluation of assets. Undervaluation means the assets did not get enough value, or when selling off the assets, government did not get the value of assets, means the assets were sold off for lesser value. So this also led to lesser revenue for the government, which means if assets are undervalued, the revenue loss will be there for the government. So this was one major disadvantage associated. Another problem associated with the disinvestment was that the revenue recovered from disinvestment, the revenue which the government received from disinvestment, was not used properly. So the revenue could have been used for the development of the PSEs itself, or for creating social infrastructure. Either it could have been used for the development of PSE or social infrastructure. But really what happened was, this revenue from the PSEs were utilized for government expenditures. So this was not properly utilized. Now let us see what happened with the fiscal policies. We have already seen that fiscal means public purse, which means that it is related to tax and government expenditure. So this is related to taxation and the government expenditure. So now let us see what happened with the fiscal policies of the government, that is taxation as well as the government expenditure. So under the fiscal policies, three important things happened. One was a decrease in the tax rates. We have already seen the taxes or the rate of taxes were reduced in order to curb the tax evasion. Secondly, the tariffs were reduced. So tariffs on trade was also reduced. Thirdly, tax incentives were given to foreign companies. So let us see what has happened. Decrease in tax rates. So a decrease in tax rates. So it means that when the tax rates decreases, the revenue of the government also decreases. Revenue decreases. Again coming to tariff rates. This was also decreased. Again the revenue of the government decreased. Now lesser revenue from tariffs. Again tax incentives to foreign companies, which means that they also have to pay now lesser tax. So again revenue loss for the government. So these three things culminated into great revenue losses for the government. And what will happen when government will have lesser revenue? The expenses of the government will come down. So with lesser revenue, the government will reduce its expenditure. So when government reduces the expenditure, what will happen? The government will have to compromise on social development. So government will spend less on social infrastructure or social issues like poverty, unemployment, etc. So the developmental expenditure of the government reduced. Again, the government cannot reduce its expenditures to a larger extent. What will the government do? Borrowings. So the borrowings increased with an increase in fiscal deficit. So revenue decreased, which means that expenditure is more than the revenue. This will lead to fiscal deficit, and with fiscal deficit, government is compelled to borrow money. So this was what happened with the taxation. We have already seen what is the impact of LPG in the Indian economy. We have also assessed what were the negative impacts. Now let us see how this LPG policy or the new economic policy has helped India to attain better heights in growth and development. First of all, it created a vibrant economy, which means that the competition of the economy increased. Foreign entities came into the economy, so our exports increased, imports increased, consumers have more choice. So the market itself became so vibrant. Secondly, it became a stimulus for the industrial production. Now raw materials are easily available. Also there is foreign competition, which means that our industries have to show their quality or bring up their best in order to survive in the market. So it served as a stimulus to the industrial production. Again, we have seen how it has helped us to curb the fiscal deficit. Foreign investments in the country increased. So foreign investments increased, FDI increased, foreign institutional investments increased, exports also increased. Now the government is only a facilitator, not the regulator. So the private entities are allowed to invest in the market. Investment can be done by the private entities and foreign companies, which means that the expenses of the government came down. Also the revenue of the government increased. This led to decreased fiscal deficit of the government. This has also led to decrease in inflation. So when the economy was opened up, there was excess of supply in the economy. This has reduced the supply-demand gap, and this led to keeping the prices under control. So now supply meets the demand. So there is no issue of price rise due to decreased supply. So this has checked the inflation in the country. Again, this has helped the consumers as well. How? Consumers have more choice now. They can choose from a variety of products that are available in the market. Earlier, they had to choose from one or two products, and those producers would charge higher prices because there is no competition. So consumers had to pay higher prices, and also they had to compromise on the quality of the product. Now they get better products at better price because there is increased competition in the market. Foreign exchange reserves in the country also increased. Forex reserves also increased. We adopted the new economic policy in the backdrop of shortage of forex resources. So how did the forex increase in the country? Because there is more FDI, that is foreign investment coming into the country. Also our exports also increased because the government adopted export promotion schemes and policies. So exports increased, also foreign investment also increased. These were all in the form of forex. So the forex reserves in the country increased. In fact, we had a shortage of forex, but now that problem is also solved. Again, private and foreign investment flowed into the economy. Private and foreign investment. With disinvestment, privatization was ensured. Also, the economy was opened up to receive foreign capital. So this has increased the infrastructure in the country, led to modernization. And we have learned that with privatization, the efficiency also increased because of better managerial skills. So efficiency of the companies or firms increased. So all this happened due to private and foreign investment. So better capital means better technology. This will lead to modernization. It will also lead to increase in the output. Increase in the output will lead to increase in GDP. GDP increase means there is growth in the economy. Also infrastructure was provided. Better efficiency again will lead to increased output in the economy. India became an emerging economic power. So India is addressed as emerging economic power. This is by developed countries. So what does it mean? When they call India as an emerging economic power, it means that they are willing to invest in the country. This will attract foreign investment and private investment in the country. So with increased investment, the country will prosper. There will be growth as well as development in the country in the form of infrastructure, more output, more productivity, more employment, poverty eradication, etc. Another important thing is that earlier it was a monopoly and now it is competition. The shift from monopoly to competition. For example, in the 1990s, if you wanted to purchase a car, what would you do? You have very less options left with you. So the consumer had lesser options. But later on what we see is, now you have a large variety of options. So from various options you can choose which one you want, and at better pricing also. So the market was a monopoly and this shifted to a competition. So perfectly competitive market. We cannot forgo the merits when we consider the demerits. And in this world, LPG is something you cannot forgo. So this was an apt decision to adopt new economic policy, liberalization, privatization and globalization. In this global world, India cannot stand alone. So it is necessary that we also cooperate with the global world.